So my name is Jennifer Bucheit. I'm the education coordinator at Oldham Creek, which is a National Estuarine Research Reserve. That's a mouthful. I'll explain it a little more in a second. There is my email if anyone wants to get a hold of me later. That is how you can do it. So the National Estuarine Research Reserve system is through our federal partner, which is NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. We are a state and federal partnership throughout this system. Obviously, our state partner is the Ohio Department of Natural Resources, and we're located at Oldham Creek. So there are 30 National Estuarine Research Reserves. I tend to shorten it to national estuaries throughout the country. And you can see that most of them are in the lower 48, but there's 3 found outside of the lower 48. And then if you zoom in a little more, you can see that there are just two in the Great Lakes. So we have been a national estuary since 1980 at Oldham Creek, and Lake Superior came online in 2010. I am so sorry. So the goal of this system is to protect and educate about our national estuaries. So an estuary is where 2 chemically distinct bodies of water meet and mix. So for us, it's Oldham Creek and Lake Erie. For all the other ones, you can see most of them are freshwater mixing with saltwater. Here in the Great Lakes, our rivers are have more ions. They're more conductive than our Great Lakes that they're entering into. Let's see here. So on the flip side for the state, we are a state nature preserve. And this partnership, we became a state nature preserve in 1979 with the intention of becoming a national estuary. Before that, it was privately owned land, a lot of it farmland. This is our trail map. We do have 573 acres, but we keep most of the human activity kind of localized to around our visitor center, and that is so that the rest of our acreage can be set aside for preservation and research if needed. We also have, you'll see in the upper left corner there, a beach location, beachside location. It is a strolling beach, not a swimming beach, because it's a state nature preserve, but it's a great place to see the lake, see Oldham Creek entering, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about the functionality of that system and why it's so unique. And those unique properties were why it was chosen to become this national estuary in Ohio. So this is what it looks like right now. Not quite that green yet, but almost. But you'll see that Oldham Creek is coming in from that wetland and entering Lake Erie through the beach. We call that a barrier beach because sometimes it fills in and it looks like that, where the sand goes all the way across the mouth. And that, what we call opening and closing, happens naturally. And I'll show you an animation of how that works. But it's naturally functioning. It's never been altered. It's never been a marina. It's never been channelized. There was a little bit of channelization when they put in the railroad there towards the bottom of the screen. But the mouth has stayed as is. And that opening and closing of the mouth really helps us study the water quality and helps our natural wetland do its ultimate best job that it can do. So I heard that you guys have heard about wetlands before, so that's good. So I won't spend a ton of time just going over. We know that wetlands are the kidneys of nature, so they do filtration for us. They help with floodwaters, they provide great habitat, and they provide a place for us to recreate. This is a picture of one of my teacher workshops. So spring and fall, we do K through 12 education, do public programming all year. And then in the summer, I turn my focus to teacher professional development so that teachers can get out in the reserve, learning the science so they can take that back to the classroom. So this is an animation of how our barrier beach system works. When we get precipitation, it flows downhill, thank you, gravity, to a low spot, which is for us typically a body of water. There's Oldham Creek. You can see at the top, the barrier beach goes across the mouth. So as that water is filling in, going downhill, it'll fill in those flood zones and it'll hang out until the water pressure gets high enough and it'll bust through that barrier beach. The important stuff for water quality happens while that barrier beach is closed. So the more time that barrier beach is closed and that water is just hanging out, the more time our plants have time to filter out those nutrients and really be that kidney. In this picture, you can kind of see all the brown is Oldham Creek, but we're clearly surrounded by agriculture. So we test the water down here as it's coming into the system and up here as it's leaving, and we can prove that the wetlands do in fact filter out around 80% of phosphates and I think 90% of nitrates. So they do a really effective job at what they're doing. And those flood areas, you know, those plants and animals are adapted to living in those really dynamic water level system that we have. So next is just some pretty pictures of things that you may find if you came and visited Oldham Creek or may see if you were visiting. So we are very well known for the American lotus. You guys seem like plant people, so you obviously know that the American lotus, as you're driving by, is an aquatic flower that is up off the surface of the water, both most of the time with the bloom and those, I call them satellite dish leaves, so they kind of follow the sun sometimes. They're also hydrophobic, so they're waterproof. If you see one floating across the water, usually a muskrat is taking it back to its hut for dinner later on. But they fill the estuary in the mid to late summer and provide that great bloom. They're also, most of this plant is edible, so it was a very important species for the indigenous populations that lived there before us. Water lily, floating on the surface. When you see them side by side like that, they don't look so similar, but a lot of people do confuse them. So plants are the leaves and the waters floating on the surface versus the lotus, which are up off of the surface. My favorite of our plants is marshmallow, so our native Great Lakes hibiscus. Again, another highly edible plant. This beautiful pink flower that we'll see. And I just love going out in July and kind of seeing those popping along the banks. Also a very good treat for our local deer population. We do get a lot of birds. We are part of that spring migration. We don't get quite as many birds or people as McGee Marsh, but we do get some good birds, and we have a lot of nature photographers that will share their work with me. Kit, who you can see his name in the corner there, always sends me some good egret pictures. I call them the Ziggy Stardust bird because the male, this is a male here, spring breeding color gets those neon eye patches, and then they have some fun flare breeding feathers in the back. So the great egret, the great blue heron is ubiquitous all around, but still a beauty to watch. My other favorite, trumpeter swans. So we've been seeing a lot of those lately passing through. There is an invasive swan called the mute swan. It looks very similar, except it has an orange bill. These guys are not nearly as aggressive as the mute swans. So if you see the mute swan, I would recommend calling your wildlife officer as they prevent our native swans from from breeding, and they can be quite aggressive to humans and dogs and other things. The kingfisher is a fun little bird. Obviously, it's a water bird. It eats fish. This is the belted kingfisher, although this one doesn't have its belt nearly quite that identifiable, but they fly by and they make this really fast, loud call. So they're always fun to see when you're out paddling on the water. Probably at Old Domain Creek, the most common waterfowl we have is the wood duck. The male is on the left, very fancy, and the female much more muted. She has a little blue patch. It's hard to see in this picture right there. Small, have a little squeak when they fly away, but we have quite a big breeding population of these guys on our estuary. And of course, bald eagles. We get a lot of people that come to see bald eagles at Old Domain Creek. If you want to come see bald eagles, you can almost always see one any day. But if you really want to see a lot, I'd suggest coming at the coldest day you can think of in January or February, and you can see upwards of 40. They just hunker down in the trees. There's no leaves on the trees, so you can just look around and count the white heads that you see sitting out and about. But for people like our nature photographers who have those huge lenses on these great cameras, you can get beautiful photographs like this. For people who like furry friends instead of feathered friends, so we do have some trail cameras out on the property. Deer and the next animal you'll see have very good hearing, so they often hear the camera clicking, so we get a lot of selfies of these guys. And the structure in the back area, this is our beaver lodge. And what we discovered with these trail cameras is that the beaver lodge is kind of town square. It's the center of town. Everybody visits, and everybody's kind of checking things out. So also visiting the beaver lodge, you can see our coyote friend here. Again, good ears, heard the camera and turned to look. It's a real healthy specimen. I don't see coyotes very often. They have plenty of room to roam. I just typically see evidence of coyotes. This tree, this is the best picture you're going to see, but this tree over here on the left, we put a trail camera on that, and that night the beavers chewed that tree down. We had to relocate our trail camera. They were like, no, thank you for that one. So in this picture, you can see that same tree, but if you notice right here, you can see my mouse in the lower right corner of each picture, that is a river otter. So river otter and mink, their cousin, are in the weasel family. You can see they have that like cylindrical body shape, and they're checking out to see if there are any little furry things they can eat around the beaver lodge. It's the only time we see river otter, or even really the only time I see evidence of them, is when I see them around the beaver lodge in these trail cameras. And there's a baby beaver. So each year our beavers have 2 to 3 kits. The kits will stay with the parents for 2 years, but the parents will have a litter every year. And so it can get kind of crowded in there. After their second year, they have to head out into the world and figure out how they're going to survive. They will have learned some things. This is Dad. Dad is in charge of maintaining the lodge, and that adage, busy as a beaver, is very accurate. So about midnight every night he goes out, and you can see he has his little path there. This is him carrying some mud up and over the top, and then heading back out into the estuary to get more supplies, be them sticks or mud, what have you. We've noticed that they also have channelized the area around their lodge because they know that it's easier to float a tree than to drag a tree. So what they've determined is that beavers are second only to humans for their ability to engineer their environment. They can be considered pest-like if you have property that you don't want flooded. At Old Domain Creek, they're not trying to dam it. we have a lazy river. It doesn't run nearly fast enough for them to bother. They really just don't like the sound of running water. But the wetlands that they can create do help with water quality, because wetlands help with water quality. So these are our amphibians that you can find, and just like the flowers that started blooming, our amphibians started calling. In the upper right, we have green frog. You can tell because he's got this line that goes back, this ridge. This is our bullfrog. Spring peepers are the ones you've probably heard already. And then salamanders. Some salamanders may have started to run, but it's probably gotten cold enough where they turned back around and went back under their logs and into the substrate. Sorry if anyone is reptile averse. Top left, we have the Midland painted turtle. Then we have a snapping turtle. That snapping turtle made its way into one of my fish nets overnight, got a free breakfast, ate some of my data points, and then I had to free it and use that stick that's in its mouth to encourage it to get on its way. And then this is the eastern fox snake. At Oldham Creek, you can find your typical garter snakes and common water snakes, and you can find the eastern fox snake, which is a wetland specific species, and it is only found in 5 counties now in Ohio. It is threatened mostly because of habitat loss. So Erie County and west along the lake is where you can find this very docile but very important snake species. So if you want to come visit us, we have paddling tours in the summertime. Like I said, we have a beach that you can visit. We have hiking tours. Our trails are open every day, sun up to sundown. We do have public programming. We have a visitor center. These 2 QR codes will get you to our website and our Facebook page, where all of our events are posted on both. So if anyone is interested in visiting or wants to know what kind of programming we're offering, those things can be found there. Also on our website, you can download our calendar for the entire year. And I think that is the end. Hopefully that's a good time for time.
It's a great time. We started a little bit late, so you're great. Thank you so much. I know
Yes.
the
Thank you.
comment about the bald eagles is a really good secret tip to know. Granted, going outside and walking around on the coldest day of the winter does not sound like much fun, but obviously it would have great reward. How often do you do your paddling tours during the summer? Is that like an everyday thing, or is that
it's
only
a
certain days?
Yeah, it's a once a week thing. So we alternate between one week it'll be Wednesday night, and then the next week it'll be Saturday morning. So we try to offer it, when people can come. You just have to call and register. All of our programming is free. There's no fees to get on the property. There's no free fees to do any of our programs. Just have to call and register.
That's great. Did anybody have any questions for Jen?
Yeah, I have a question, Jen. So as far as your staff and the wildlife, like what all do you do to manage that? Or like I heard you talk about the mute swan. Do you
Yeah.
take actions against those, or what do you do?
Officially against the mute swans, the Division of Wildlife, so that is a sister agency to us, does have a removal program. Typically that's going to be a wildlife officer. We do species monitoring, so we pick specific groups of animals. So as an example, we have secretive marsh birds, or our frog watch. And we have volunteers that will come out and listen for calls of birds and frogs, and then write down, what species they hear. We also have salamanders, and we have a pair of volunteers that monitor our bald eagle nest. So we have a relatively small staff, like 6 people. And so we rely heavily on our volunteer citizen science folks to help us. We do a lot of, well, we can, because it's a state nature preserve, we can only have native plants. So now that spring is sprung, we're going to do some invasive species removals. We have both terrestrial and aquatic species that we try to manage for invasive removals.
That was going to be my question. Do you find that you have a lot, or do you do invasive removal kind of like every season?
Yes. We have focused most of our energy in the past on the aquatic arena. So when I first started in 2013, when I looked out at the wetland, it was almost all Phragmites. And then we really did some both chemical and mechanical removal of, I'm sorry, both mechanical and chemical removal of Phragmites. And then water levels rising in 2019 and 2020 really helped us keep Phragmites at bay. We also found in 2017, we have European frogbit, which is a very small floating plant that we can remove best mechanically. It is very resistant to the different chemicals that the department or the Division of Natural Areas and Preserves have tried. So we do have every other Saturday in the summer, we have a volunteer removal where if you want to come paddle, the canoes and the kayaks are free. We just hand you a bucket, show you the plant, and we have these little like extendo rakes. And so from your boat, they're free floating plants. So you just rake it over and dump it in your bucket. And then we compost them far enough away where they won't be able to like blow back in to the water.
That sounds pretty exciting, to be honest.
It does.
It's lovely. And it's so like I always tell people it's kind of addictive because once you start grabbing it, like if you see one that you just can't reach, you have to like turn around and go get it because you just like don't want to leave one behind. So and then this year we're going to do a garlic mustard pull as one of our terrestrial things coming up in April.
Do you know the date for that? I'm sorry to interrupt.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Do you know a date for the invasive removal, the garlic mustard removal? It's okay if you don't. That's okay.
I don't, but I can email Sherry and she can put it out to your
Yeah,
group if you want, and it should be on our calendars in different areas. I want to say it's either late April or early May, but it's got to be April because we want to get it before it goes to seed. So
yeah.
But a lot of our terrestrial management really falls under the Natural Areas and Preserve staff, and they do use some herbicides for that because they go so fast, autumn olive and privet and some of those kind of big ones, multiflora rose, which I do not like to battle physically. So
Well, that's good to know because I know we have a number of our members that really like to get hands-on. And so to know that there are things like removals or if you have garden plantings or tree plantings or things like that, it'd be great for our members to, connect on Facebook or on the website, as you mentioned earlier, and, get your fix.
Yeah. And if anyone wants more information, shoot me an email and I can get you hooked up if you want to come out and kill some unwanted plants.
Jen, can you put your website in the chat for us so we can all
Yes,
have access to that? That would be wonderful.
yes. It isn't. I'm gonna take a second and
You're fine. Take your time.
Okay.
Does anybody else have any questions or anything to add? This has been great. I was gonna ask about invasives too, so I'm glad we chatted about that. So all right.
I think
Well,
it's
thanks,
a good
Jen.
exercise too, and knowing, to join you, it helps. now my dogs are starting.
Sorry.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you know, like weeding at my house always is almost like therapeutic because you don't have to think about
Yeah.
anything else. You're just like
Mhm.
sitting there pulling. So I'd imagine like sitting on a kayak and like having the water, like it would just be like very relaxing.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
way better than, just the normal terrestrial removal.
Yeah.
Like, whoa, you can get in the paddle and chill and
Yep.
take in the beauty, and then kill some plants,
Kill
We
some
could
bad
make it a
plants.
wild ones field trip.
There you
You
go.
could carpool.
Oop, did I? Oh,
Did
All right, I
somebody
have-
else have a question that came on? Thought I saw maybe a question. No? Okay, sorry.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks, Jen.
Thank you so much.
Oh, and she
Oh,
just
great.
dropped the website in the chat. So anybody who's interested, you can click on that. Oh, there we go. May 4th at 10 a.m. for the garlic mustard. Awesome. Thanks,
Sounds
Laura, for
good.
checking that.